This is Adam Gorney with Adam Friedman and Greg Smith, and we are doing the Rivals Recruiting Podcast from a 2023 Cadillac Escalade, thanks to Avis's upgrade for Friedman getting the car. And we are at the NextGen Pro Day. Let's talk MVPs. Let's start right at the top, quarterback Will Griffin. He's very good. I'll throw this one to Friedman. The kid is physical, he's big, and he can sling it. And I think he's one of the top quarterbacks in that class.
Yeah, we were talking about a couple of player comparisons while we were out there. Brady Quinn came to mind. Brock Vandegrift came to mind. The guy is really built. The guy is jacked for a 2026 quarterback. He's got great arm strength. He threw a really accurate ball. He was kind of placing the ball a little bit, but he threw with really good touch. He's got great size already for his year. And it sounds like teams like Florida and Georgia are already very much in the mix for him, playing at Tampa Jesuit, I believe, and he's got a ton of potential and probably going to be one of the highest rated quarterbacks in his class when the rankings come out for that 2026 class. I know there were a couple other quarterbacks we had our eyes on out there. One of them was Bear Bachmeier. Gorney, I know it's somebody you've paid a lot of attention to throughout the process, and Greg, I know you've seen him now a couple of times, I believe. What were your guys' thoughts on that race for quarterback MVP with Bachmeier kind of on Griffin's heels a little bit?
Yeah, it was interesting because, like I said, he was on his heels. Griffin is just so physically impressive. I did think that Bachmeier threw the ball really well today. A little streaky, but I think that sometimes that can happen in some of these camp settings. But I did like what I saw out of him, on average.
Let's talk about the two big-time running backs there. Definitely different players. Hot and cold for Turbo Rogers a little bit. He struggled catching the ball a little bit, but you could tell he has a lot of speed.
Yeah.
And then Jordan Davison, who can get out and catch passes like that, but is best between the tackles. Davison won the MVP. What did you think of both, Friedman?
Yeah, Davison very much between the tackles runner. You could tell just by his build. He's built to take that punishment between the tackles. He's got really good vision. You can see the burst off of his plant foot and really just off the snap. But Turbo Rogers, the nickname is very much warranted, I believe. The guy's got a ton of juice. He's on the smaller side for sure, but he's a game breaker. When he's got the ball in his hands, he can really take it the distance. He did a great job separating from linebackers in the open field. Quarterbacks didn't really have a hard time finding him, just had a hard time really completing the catch a number of times there. That's something that I'm sure we'll see him work on over the next couple of years. But it was a pretty good running back group with those two at the top there, right, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. And Davison, too, one thing I wanted to mention is in drills, you could see sometimes it's hard in these camps that those guys that are really good between the tackles for them to be able to excel and show what they can do. But he really did in the drills, right? I thought that you could see his footwork in those, and that was really good. And with Turbo as well, I wanted to mention him, the separation when he was going out for passes. I think that was something that was interesting too, because they did a lot of routes for those guys. Usually you don't always see that with the running backs, but him being able to show separation in the passing game as a receiver was really nice as well.
Wide receiver, Aaron Gregory, 2026 kid, very impressive. Reminds me of a young Jalen Hale. I made that comparison on the field. I thought, a longer kid, speed. He has a lot going for him, and I think he could be one of the best receivers in the class. Also, two other guys to take a look at: Andrew Marsh, who just continues to catch everything, and then Winston Watkins. A little bit more of a quiet day for Winnie than we've seen before. With 3 5-stars in that class, it's going to be a battle at number one. But let's talk about those three guys.
Yeah, definitely love Gregory, man. That guy, he's got a chance to be really highly rated in that 2026 class. Excellent length. Really turned on the competitive juices when one-on-one started up. You could see he was kind of going through the motions a little bit during drills, which is fine. There wasn't a huge group of players out there, but really sticky hands, did a great job catching the pass consistently away from his body on a variety of routes and against a variety of defensive backs, safeties, corners, big, small, long, a little bit sawed off, other DBs like that, and he just has a chance to be really highly rated. I'm excited to see him. Like you mentioned, though, a quieter day for Winston Watkins, somebody we've come to see as a really explosive prospect. He has definitely gotten stronger, but I still think his skill set's more aligned for an inside receiver, a slot receiver, not so much an outside guy, I think, but has a great skill set, really good hands, and It's interesting to see what kind of production he had against some really highly touted defensive backs that were on the field. I think that's kind of indicative of what his ceiling might be at the next level. So it's something to watch there. I know Marsh was somebody you kept your eye on too, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Gorney kind of mentioned it too about being able to see him catch everything, right? And I think that he's a guy that he's different from, say, a guy like Watkins, who's kind of a smaller guy that can really create separation in the slot. Marsh is going to have guys with him a little bit more, but he uses that separation at the end and those great hands to be able to snag everything in sight. And so seeing that was really nice. And I think that he's a really good player. I do want to mention Gregory again, though, is that he was a guy that really turned a lot of heads today, and I think that he's someone that's in line for quite a nice ranking in that 2026 group.
Offensive line, S.J. Olafetuli measured in at 6 feet, I think. He's not going to be like the prototypical offensive lineman. He's not going to blow you away with how he looks, but no one gets past him. He wins every single rep and dominates, and he's done that for a very long time and in a lot of different settings. He won the MVP, but Kini Pepe is definitely another guy who, as a 26, is projecting as a potential 5-star. Another guy kind of that plays outside. He's 6'7" now. He plays outside, but actually could move inside. That's an interesting one. Not a huge group, but some talent there at the top.
Yeah, I like Pepe's upside for sure. He brings versatility to the offensive line. SJ, I'm not even going to try the last name because I know I'm going to mess it up. I could see him moving into center, maybe even next year at the high school level, and certainly at the college level. I think that's probably where he projects at. He's just shorter. He's a little sawed off, but super strong hands. Anytime he gets his hands on the defensive lineman, the rep is pretty much over. You can't overpower him. There were some pretty strong interior defensive linemen here today, and I think SJ's was just a brick wall. 3 really good offensive linemen at his school, Bishop Gorman. He's one of them, and I think he might be one of the most solid of the group there. I'm also like Michael Carroll. He's a 2025 offensive lineman from Pennsylvania. He's one of the stock risers from the camp today. He just got a Penn State offer at camp up there. He keeps getting bigger each time we see him. He was at our New Jersey Rivals camp earlier this year, and he continues to get better. Looking forward to seeing him improve that hand placement a little bit. He was a bit high today, but that's just another one of those offensive linemen that we saw that were pretty impressive today.
Yeah, there were some nice looking offensive linemen out there, and SJ brick wall is the perfect description for him. It was just like he gets set and his hands on kids so quickly, and then it's over. It just is. There's no way around that because one of the leaders of that powerful run game out there, Bishop Gorman, they got a really good running game out there this year as well, and so he's a really good player. It was nice to see him out there against a good competition.
Mm-hmm. Darius Gray was also really good. I don't want to get away from this offensive line group without mentioning him. 2026 guy from Richmond, Virginia, has a bunch of offers and has a pretty high ceiling too. We'll see how much bigger he gets. He measured in about 6'2", 6'3", but super strong hands, really good feet. Played tackle, played guard today. And really stepped up against some of the older guys.
D-line, the MVP was Christopher Burgess. Definitely a good-looking kid. Loved his arm extension. He'd drive offensive linemen back. London Merritt's a very interesting kid, though, because at the end he sort of struggled. Then he got really upset and mad, and you could tell it in his face. He moved inside and then really kind of thrived there. So I'm not so sure he's not even like a jack inside linebacker type. He's like what Alabama has had in years past at that position. I don't know exactly what position he is, but he's going to get on the field and he's going to be productive because he's also a great looking kid.
Yeah, he's got a great attitude about it too. He all he wants to do is improve on the field. He doesn't get discouraged. He just gets mad. And when he got mad, he got better today. And he knows that his versatility is his strength. Being able to play outside, inside, off the ball, hand in the ground. He's going to be able to do a lot of different things at the next level. And he's got a who's who of top schools, coming after him right now. I liked him a lot. I like Burgess a lot. A lot of potential with Burgess. He's got a ton of room to improve, which is a scary thought thought for offensive linemen because he was very, very good today. And I like 2026 defensive tackle Preston Carey. He's just a monster in the middle. He's a big guy, strong, aggressive, plays angry. He's got a little bit to learn when it comes to technique and playing with proper pad level, but he has very good hands already. I believe we were already talking about how great his handwork was. He did a nice job swatting offensive linemen away from him and just getting by them. He could bull rush even when you're not supposed to, but he could also do a really good job just making sure those guys just couldn't hold on to him. He spun around guys. He was able to shoot gaps and had counter moves pretty much for anything they wanted to do.
Yeah, and Burgess was one of those guys that was on my kind of players to watch on defense coming into this camp, and really didn't disappoint. Kind of talking to him ahead of their time on the field, he was telling me he's been to some camps, and then he went out to Michigan, Ohio State. Those are two of the teams that are involved there. He's from Chicago, so he went on a visit to Illinois as well, and some of those other local schools. But he told me the feedback that he got from coaches that he needed to loosen his hips up. He's got tight hips, and you could see a little bit of that. But boy, if he unlocks that, like, who's going to be able to block that kid? It would be a scary thought to see what he ends up turning into. Another guy that I was kind of interested in, particularly with his frame, is Michael Riles. He had some nice moves out there as well along the defensive line. He needs to refine the game. He's still kind of raw, but as he continues to come into that frame, he could be a really interesting player down the road too.
At linebacker, one name I think stood out most, and it'll be interesting to see where he falls in the rankings. Christian Jones. He's top 100 kid in 25 now, 5th at outside linebacker. I don't know if we move him inside. It's probably his long-term position. It's a pretty strong group at outside linebacker, but that kid was off the bus, one of the best-looking kids there.
Definitely. I think the conversation at linebacker today really starts and ends with Jones. Great-looking kid. Moved around great in space for a big guy like that. Physically mature guy. I hope that he doesn't get too bulky before he gets to college because his speed and that frame really made it difficult for any running back he came across, any tight end he guarded, and he even lined up against some receivers during one-on-one. Super impressive guy from Nebraska, Greg, right?
Yeah. So I've seen him play several times, and really he's been starting on varsity since he was a freshman. So this is nothing new for him, and I know coming into this he wanted to come out here and be on the big stage and go against some of the country's elite players, and he showed well for himself out there. Friedman, I completely agree with you said though about him not getting too bulky, because that size speed combination is going to be his meal ticket at the next level. Will allow him to kind of play in a variety of defenses as well. It's why you don't know if you should keep him at outside linebacker or move him inside, because that frame allows him some flexibility. He's a really good prospect.
Mm-hmm.
And then defensive back, I think, was probably the most loaded group.
Yeah.
Zach Fort won the MVP, had an interception, had at least a few other knockdowns. Very instinctual kid. And DJ Pickett is a kid I want to talk about because he has told us now that he wants to play both sides in college, and it will impact his decision. So the schools, if you want DJ Pickett, tell him he'll play both ways, and then he'll get on campus and he'll be a safety, outside linebacker. But he's a very interesting kid just because of he is a legit 6'4", and he's very, very long.
Yeah, he weighed in at 180 today, I believe. He's a fairly lean guy at 6'4" or whatever he was. Interesting to see where he's going to end up at the college level. What position? He did a good job in man coverage. He's super long. He's got great straight line speed, and that makes up for what he lacks in some transition speed, which can be the major difference between cornerbacks and safeties, and even outside linebackers as well. I wanted to highlight two other guys for sure. Fahim Delane, a guy who I know really well from Good Counsel in Maryland, continues to impress, even in man coverage like this. A safety prospect, he did a really good job using his instincts, reading hips, reading footwork, getting his hands on the ball, playing physically, super high ceiling for him as well. I think, Gorney, you mentioned a comparison to Minkah Fitzpatrick a bit, which is, I think, a really good comparison. He's a little bit more thick and muscular than Minkah was at the same stage, and I think the instincts are very similar between the two. Somebody else who I know we're really excited about is Miami commit Kisani, excuse me.
That's
Giles.
what I'm trying to pull up.
Yeah, he's
Kasani,
really impressive physically. Great length in his arms, really good instincts, got his hands on the ball a few times, and played physically, has really good speed. I think the Canes should be really excited about his commitment and, really hope that the staff can work and hold on to his commitment down the road.
Yeah, absolutely, because not only was he excited about being a Miami commit, he told me ahead of time he wanted to bring some more guys with him from out west, so he's really excited about that and what they've got going on. He's definitely a player that we're going to be talking about nationally for a couple of more years here. You'll hear that name a lot. Zach Fort was another guy that I think that should be highlighted. He was a really good player out there as well. Really good speed, good change of direction as well. I really liked what he did too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the winner of the day is this Cadillac Escalade because it is 3 rows. It is beautiful. Probably MSRP is probably well over $125. It's very nice, and we want to thank the people at Avis at the Atlanta airport for upgrading us because we went from a Kia Forte to this. So, with that is the Rivals Recruiting Podcast from the NextGen 5-Star Pro Day.